Hi, my name is Joanna Whitney. I am an intuitive artist, a student of natural law, and an energy practitioner. And we are studying the Kybalion by the three initiates. And we're in chapter 10 about polarity. And we're on page 72. And as I mentioned last week, they're going to be talking, they're going into detail about the law of polarity, which is kind of drawn out in a way. And so I just want to go into a little detail about it myself first before we go back into this reading. I want to just say, for example, that the law of mentalism is in unity. It's the one. And then the following laws are all laws that govern duality, which is two, which is what the law of polarity is about. However, mentalism in duality is the all and all. So the all is the ununderstandable creator, and then all is the creation, us. Then we have in the law of correspondence, there's also duality, two poles, below and above, within and without. The law of vibration is high and low and all the degrees in between. The law of rhythm is up and down, in and out, around and around, ebb and flow. The law of cause and effect is cause and effect. That's the two poles. And the law of gender is masculine and feminine, also two poles. When I was discussing divine paradox, I brought up a solipsism, which is where the individual thinks that there is no truth. In a way, in duality, there is no truth, but it is up to each individual person to aspire to the truth, which is in unity consciousness, the law of mentalism. In duality, there is only relative truth, but it is our job to create unity with mentalism, the one, the all, by seeking the all. And by separating from the all we do is create chaos. So I just want to point that out because it's going to get into a very intricate discussion about polarity. And I just wanted to lay that groundwork. So we're on page 72, as I said. It says, then passing on to the physical plane, they illustrate the principle by showing that heat and cold are identical in nature, the differences being merely a matter of degrees. The thermometer shows many degrees of temperature, the lowest pole being called cold and the highest heat. Between these two poles are many degrees of heat or cold. Call them either and you are equally correct. The higher of 2 degrees is always warmer, while the lower is always colder. There is no absolute standard. All is a matter of degree. There is no place on the thermometer where heat ceases and cold begins. It is all a matter of higher or lower vibrations. The very terms high and low, which we are compelled to use, are but poles of the same thing. The terms are relative. So with east and west, travel around the world in an eastward direction and you reach a point which is called west at your starting point, and you return from that westward point. Travel far enough north and you will find yourself traveling south, or vice versa. Light and darkness are poles of the same thing, with many degrees in between. The musical scale is the same. Starting with C, you move upward until you reach another C, and so on. The differences between the two ends of the board being the same, with many degrees between the two extremes. The scale of color is the same, higher and lower vibrations being the only difference between high violet and low red. Large and small are relative. So are noise and quiet, hard and soft follow the rule. Likewise, sharp and dull, positive and negative are two poles of the same thing, with countless degrees in between. Good and bad are not absolute. We call one end of the scale good and the other bad, or one end good and the other evil, according to the use of the terms. A thing is less good than the thing higher in the scale, but that less good thing in turn is more good than the thing next below it, and so on, the more or less being regulated by the position on the scale. As I'm reading this, I'm just thinking, this is an election year. So you might say the Republicans and the Democrats are two poles of the same thing. I would say it's two poles of a falsehood. So the fact that people are actually hating one another over this falsehood, this negligible belief in the ability to delegate power to others to run your life for you, and people are going to kill each other over this ridiculousness, is sort of illustrating this point. It's degrees of the same thing. Some things are true, some are false. So you have to ask yourself the question of what your values are, what you value. Do you value life? Because all of these things are relative and they're all equal, except in matters of degree, do you really want to get caught up in the media frenzy that's whipping us up so that we will hate one another? That's just an example of polarization at the moment, and it's happening wildly. Me personally, I am getting so sick and tired of everything going on that I am getting away from the internet as much as I possibly can and getting back into nature. Where, yes, there's polarity in nature, but it is much easier to deal with than this satanic polarization of everything and the misinformation psyops that are constantly happening. And I know how to deal with polarity, rising into a state of neutrality. I can do that in nature and with much more ease than I can do it in dealing with humanity and this craziness that's going on right now. I just wanted to say that. And so it is with the mental plane. Love and hate are generally regarded as being things diametrically opposite to each other, entirely different, irreconcilable. But we apply the principle of polarity, we find that there is no such thing as absolute love or absolute hate, as distinguished from each other. The two are merely terms applied to the two poles of the same thing. Beginning at any point of the scale, we find more love or less hate as we ascend the scale, and more hate or less love as we descend. This being true, no matter from what point, high or low, we may start. There are degrees of love and hate, and there is a middle point where like and dislike become so faint that it is difficult to distinguish between them. Courage and fear come under the same rule. The pairs of opposites exist everywhere. Where you find one thing, you find its opposite, the two poles. And it is this fact that enables the hermetist to transmute one mental state into another along the lines of polarization. Things belonging to different classes cannot be transmuted into each other, but things of the same class may be changed, that is, may have their polarity changed. Thus, love never becomes east or west, nor red or violet, but it may often turn into hate. And likewise, hate may be transferred into love by changing its polarity. Courage may be transmuted into fear, and the reverse. Hard things may be rendered soft, dull things become sharp, hot things become cold, and so on. The transmutation always being between the things of the same kind of different degrees. Take the case of a fearful man. By raising his mental vibrations along the line of fear-courage, he can be filled with the highest degree of courage and fearlessness. And likewise, the slothful man may change himself into an active, energetic individual simply by polarizing along the lines of the desired quality. So that just shows, if you apply mentalism to the two poles and use prayer, especially, you can rise into a state of neutrality and find truth and find power as a slothful person to move into action, or find courage to walk through fear. I don't like to say face fear, but to walk through fear with courage. Courage is fear that said its prayers. I like that idea. The student who is familiar with the process by which the various schools of mental science produce changes in the mental states of those following their teachings may not readily understand the principle underlying many of these changes. When, however, the principle of polarity is once grasped, and it is seen that the mental changes are occasioned by a change of polarity, a sliding along the same scale, the hatter is readily understood. I think it's the latter. It's supposed to be the latter is readily understood. The change is not in the nature of a transmutation of one thing into another thing entirely different, but it is merely a change of degree in the same things, a vastly important difference. For instance, borrowing an analogy from the physical plane, it is impossible to change heat into sharpness, loudness, highness, etc., but heat may readily be transmuted into cold simply by lowering the vibrations. In the same way, hate and love are mutually transmutable. So are fear and courage, but fear cannot be transformed into love, nor can courage be transmuted into hate. The mental states belong to innumerable classes, each class of which has its opposite poles, along with transmutation is possible. I have to go back here for a second because I'm not sure I agree with what they just said here. In the same way, hate and love are mutually transmutable, so are fear and courage, but fear cannot be transformed into love. I don't agree with that. Fear can be transformed into love using prayer. But I understand what they're trying to say, but that just simply doesn't work. Because fear is at the basis of hate. So that's where I have a missing piece with this book, because it doesn't really it talks about the all, but it doesn't really talk about humans having access to the all through prayer, which is my experience. So I'm just going to say that, you know, as long as I'm living in alignment with morality, I have pure, full-on access to the all and the power. I may not understand it the same way I don't really understand how my car works, but I have a key and I turn on my car. So I have access to that incredible power, whether I know how to use it, know how it works or not. I don't need to know every little thing about how it works. All I need to do is get in the car. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think there's some things missing from this book. I mean, I've heard a lot of things, you know, since I've been studying this book, I've heard a lot of things. Recently I heard that Thoth was an Anunnaki alien who stole these principles and called them his own principles. And then left out that there's like, let's see, there's 7 of these. There's 6 other principles I recently heard. Now, do I believe it? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to study it and see how I feel about it. Study the principles that they claim. But you know how it is out there right now. I mean, everybody's trying to chop everybody's information, and it's all about, you know, each person having the new cool information. And it's probably all based on finance, because everybody wants the newest, coolest information, and they want to be the first one to get the new cool information. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. I can only go with my experience and what I get through meditation. And this book, although it talks about the all being God, the creator, and being all powerful, it does also allude to it as being far away and not really accessible to us. And that, again, is not my experience. So I do not put this book on a pedestal, even though it's written anonymously by 3 initiates. If it may be written by William Walker Atkinson or whoever, I think they left out a very important point, which is that if you're aligned with morality and you've cleaned up the wreckage of your past, and you've, you know, you don't break your promises, you keep your word, you do what you say you're going to do, you're kind, you treat others the way you want to be treated, then you have access to this power and you can use prayer. So I'm going to stop there on page 73 until next time. And I am going to be out of town next week, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do another video before I leave. So there may be a week break, but if I have time before I leave, I will make another video. Until next time.